Welcome to The Full Experience. This is a show that takes 4 episodes from the catalog of a TV show and looks at the first, ultimate, lowest, and last to determine what that show was like. It's like taking a slice of the archaeological record to figure out what a show is all about. We are beginning our journey into the outer limits. We will start with episode 1, The Galaxy Being, followed by Demon with a Glass Hand, then Tourist Attraction, and finally, their last episode, The Probe. But let's start with The Galaxy Being, episode 1 of The Outer Limits, which first aired September 16th, 1963. I'm Tom Merritt. He's Brian Brushwood.
Hey, man. So this is really, really interesting because I just asked... while you were doing the intro, I just asked one of them talking robots, is The Outer Limits a ripoff of the Twilight Zone? And the robot said, no, it isn't, but it is very similar. So
the robot took offense to your term ripoff.
It did.
But,
it did.
Yeah.
It was a loaded term, but almost certainly it was an answer to the cultural smash hit that was the Twilight Zone.
Yeah, it's there's a Dante's Peak and there's Armageddon, right?
That's right. There's a like father, like son, and there's a vice versa.
Exactly. So there's a Twilight Zone and there's an Outer Limits, and they both got rebooted later as well. But we are looking at the OG, the very first time we traveled to the Outer Limits, starting with what has become, I think, for many decades, iconic. I don't know if it's still culturally relevant, but we control the audio, we control the video. My first experience with the Outer Limits was someone referencing that in like a comedy show versus actually seeing it on screen. And then later I saw this, I'm like, oh, that's where that came from. What about you?
It is funny, those cultural artifacts, like, I don't know, I had never watched Rawhide, but people would sing that song. I guess that was a cultural touchstone, kind of like the way I experienced all of my 1950s history from old issues of Mad Magazine or watching the Flintstones reruns.
Yeah.
By the way, for anybody keeping score at home, the Twilight Zone was 1959 to 1964. Outer Limits was 1963 to 1965. And as we're going into this, Tom, I knew about Twilight Zone, but I hadn't really thought about what the flavor of the Outer Limits is and how it was different from the Twilight Zone. The Twilight Zone is sort of very human-centric, whereas I seem to feel like, and certainly this first episode seemed to be like the Outer Limits was more sci-fi alien-y. And this is all vague recollections that I'm disclosing my priors going into this.
Sure. Yeah. I feel like you're circling around the right thing though. The Twilight Zone, I want to say it's more cerebral, but that would be insulting the Outer Limits, and I don't mean to. But the Twilight Zone was very concerned with, the devil's bargain kind of story. Like, I wish for something and it turns out that my wish was granted, but not without consequences, or sort of the mystery of like, what is really going on here? Things seem a little too nice. Oh, it turns out everybody's dead or whatever, right? Yeah, there's always a twist. Whereas this feels very straightforward. Like, okay, this guy's up to something and it's mind-blowing and unusual, but it's not so much a mystery. It's more, like you say, it's more of a sci-fi story.
Yeah. So Twilight Zone episodes tended to feel like a snake coiling and you didn't know what the strike was going to be, but you knew one was coming. Whereas in this case, The Outer Limits, this first episode, it's very flat, discursive, and straightforward.
Yeah. And you have a little bit of a mystery at the beginning of like, what's that guy using the power for? But you quickly find out it's not held till later.
Well, I want to share kind of my experience, but before we do, Amos, do you mind joining us and letting us know kind of your experience? For anybody new here, Amos is our producer who oftentimes joins us for the full experience.
I will say that I'd never seen The Outer Limits. This is a new one for me. I'd heard about it, tangentially related to it's kind of the Twilight Zone vibe. So I was excited to go into this and watch this. This episode, I hope, does not indicate things to come. Let's say the pacing was absolutely awful. I didn't feel a sense of mystery or anything. I felt a sense dread of still continuing to watch this 51-minute episode that really had about 20 minutes of story. And the reused graphics, the fact that at one point you can tell the costume like kind of came untucked in the collar and they never bothered to tuck it back in. And at one point they turn around and they didn't take any effort to make the science fiction graphical aspect of it anything other than just a filter on a CRT with some overlay. It was
so
it felt like a half-ass attempt at a Twilight Zone episode that didn't hit.
I also got the vibe. I was surprised when it got slow near the end of the second act when it became Monster Mash time. Around that time, I was like, "This is long," and I noticed I was like, "Oh, these aren't half-hour episodes." Do you guys know, but without checking, how long Twilight Zone episodes were?
27 minutes.
The
Just
first 3 seasons were 25 minutes, the original run was 25 minutes per episode, but season 4 episodes were 51 minutes of Twilight Zone.
Interesting.
I didn't know that, right? And whereas Outer Limits was launching around the time season 4, and so it matched it with 51 minutes. And I think you're right, Amos. You can feel when they really are just doing that's kind of a special effect. That effect is kind of special.
Yeah.
Let's take 5 whole minutes on it.
One of my notes is this is killer stuff in 1963. So some of it is probably even cheap by 1963 standards, but is very much like people in 1963 won't have as sophisticated eyes for these things. They'll be like, whoa, how did they do that?
I really think they had maybe 10 minutes total in the costume, because every time that the galaxy creature comes walking across the screen, it's the same tape. It's the same. They don't. You can
that
go.
Dude
they go
loves
in.
Walking
they look
behind
off to
windows.
the right. They look forward, and then they lean back, and then they walk forward.
Yeah, but
And
again,
it's the
people
same
back
thing.
then wouldn't notice that.
Right.
They would just notice that like they made a guy glowy. How do they do that?
There was one moment that I was like, okay, come on, where in order, obviously what they do is they did a reverse image thing. So it's like he's in a dark suit, but it looks like it's glowing. And so as a result, the specular highlights show up as black dots, and it does kind of create this otherworldly thing. If you ain't seen it, it's probably impressive. But then he's like experiencing an antique shop, and it's like, okay, the shadows should not be reversed on the urn that he's looking at for the first
the
time.
violins hanging from the ceiling are all
and it
reversed.
spin around, and then like what clearly is the dark hole in a guitar is bright white. But
I did not understand. There are a lot of plot holes. I've got a lot of picky bits on this. I didn't understand why he wanted to go pawn something, because that wasn't an antique shop. That said loans above the door when he went in. So that was a pawn shop.
It was a pawn shop. Yeah.
Oh, that's right.
There's the plot, a lot of hiccups. How do they know exactly where to go? How did he have to drive in a station wagon to get to the place? The galaxy guy.
Why didn't they just cut the power?
Well,
at the end,
they did establish that. They established that with the power got too much, and there ended up being a sci-fi reason that his body was there, so it was self-sustaining at that point. Wait, they did cut the power. That's how the story ended.
Yes. Why did he do it immediately? That's what I mean. Like, he took so long, like, but I want to, no, don't come in here. Like, just go cut the power. That's the thing you want to do. Just go turn it. We saw how easy it was to turn up. It's got to be just as easy to turn back down. Like,
all right, let me, okay. I am the court assigned public defender for this episode.
Yes.
I loved it, guys. I loved everything about it. I loved the whole intro thing, that we control the vertical and the horizontal.
Yeah. That's classic.
Because and this is straight up the magician in me coming out, is where there exists structure, where there exists the familiar, there is an opportunity to subvert that. And so I'm certain that the trick of, I bet there was thousands of kids who waited for the following week to call their parents in with the volume turned down just at the part where the vertical was rolling.
Do not adjust your television set was not heard by those parents.
Exactly. Right. So I loved all of that. And yes, it's low budget, primitive. It's television budgets, which were nowhere near film budgets. But if you told me this was a movie from black and white cinema era, I would believe you. It looks
especially
if
you're like, this is a mid-budget movie. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, it looks as good as Donovan's Brain from 10 years earlier,
right?
One of those sci-fi classics. And so I was really impressed with first of all, it was hilarious to me how filmed in Hollywood it was. Like the opening shot. I'm now at the point where I'm like, I recognize that tree,
Well, and they named the city after a neighborhood in Los Angeles, Los Feliz.
yeah. But they grafted on a little bit of enough of a story, family-owned business or whatever. But the part that I really dug was how quickly they hit all of the plot beats. Basically, they did all of the movie Contact in about 25 minutes. And I loved it. And then it became Monster Mash for 15 minutes that with a bunch of effects that, while I agree, Tom, were dazzling at the time, did not age enough to justify at the time.
Yeah. It was also interesting. They got a little Twilight Zone-y with his rhetoric about, yes, big labs make slow and steady progress, but it's the little guy who makes the big advances. And then we get into a very 1960s nuclear age. Be careful what you wish for. If you mess with forces beyond your control, irresponsibility could lead to disastrous consequences. It's thinly veiled nuclear analog there.
Also, the radiation healed her.
Different rules. This is a time, keep in mind, this is when people were paying money to go sit in radium mines.
Yeah,
so,
right. This is definitely a time where Life magazine is running the healing powers of radiation and like radiation preserving food so you won't even need a refrigerator. I literally have those articles from Life magazine in my closet.
I just thought that was like, if nothing else made it of its time, that did.
Yeah.
Like that really cemented exactly when this was made.
Also, the radio station having a computer, this like remote radio station that's like, let me use my mainframe with its reel to reels.
Well, I thought they did a pretty elegant job of threading that needle too, because it's clear that they had the power and the money was being made by the radio station, but clearly the guy was diverting funds for his projects.
But you got to remember, a mainframe back then, that's something only the largest corporations could afford. So and that's not of its time thing. That's like the audience would know that. Like, ooh, he's got a computer. Like that's expensive. How did he get that? I would be wondering that even in 1963, I think.
Sure. But narratively, it's a fine enough black box.
It didn't ruin the story for me. It just made me go, that's interesting. Also, the slow English where he's like, can you understand me? Talk to me in like when you do the slow English where it's like, that's not going to make him understand you anymore. But somehow.
Can I defend even that?
Sure.
Because we are, this was shot on film and I know it was shot on film because we see the shadow of the cameraman several times. It was shot on film and upscaled to HD. But think about this message in the format where bunny ears, antennas, it's about a signal being boosted and about people wishing they could hear things, both the radio station in the human drama and in the cosmic drama that's unfolding, and with the people who are actively watching this show. They probably were, holding bunny ears and all that stuff. I really went to that place, and it felt like when, reading, a Silver Age of science fiction short story.
Yeah, but if he doesn't understand English, speaking it loud and slowly isn't going to change his comprehension.
What I'm saying is that was an elegant way to make sure that even
people understood
at home could hear.
Sure.
Like that was the experience of people watching it.
Why did the radio station have 5 letters?
KVI?
Yeah. Oh, you know what? The same reason that phone numbers are all 555.
Well, sure.
Also, ham radio licenses are 5.
Is that a problem to just make up radio station letters though? Like that's never a problem in almost any other piece of art from that era. You just make up letters. I don't know. Maybe they thought they would get in trouble with the FCC if they use real letters. I don't know.
Or maybe you know what? in this, well, clearly this is not in our universe, Tom. This is in another universe.
We're in the outer limits. Actually,
where the
I
speed
like
of light
that.
is not
I like
a
that
problem.
explanation quite a bit. This is a world where radio stations in the United States have 5 letters, not 4 letters.
I actually spent a little time trying to figure out why, like if KXKVI was a special meaning, if it like meant something else, or if
it was an
taken
acronym
on a
or
meaning
something.
since then.
Yeah.
And it links to a website that is not very functional. Like if you go to kxkvi.com, I don't really know what they're doing with it. They reference the show, but that's about it.
Okay.
And then, like you said, normal call letters are going to be 4. Usually you only hear for well, it's the same. Radio and airports are the same, but airports decide to only use 3 for the most part. But yeah, they're only 4.
Also, K is usually west of the Mississippi, which that would track. So they got that
right.
Just for fun, I asked a robot, and with complete confidence, it said this was intentional to avoid conflict with actual FCC licensed stations. But I think
it could be possible that putting this on a broadcast station, because there were some strict rules about saying call letters at the top of the hour and identifying your station. So maybe they wanted to avoid that. I'd buy it, but I like your alternate universe explanation even better.
It does solve a lot of things about physics. Also, I did love NPC Galaxy Godman, who's like, wait, I'm gonna go to a party. Okay, standing in a box.
Yeah, and just stands there, like, because time doesn't mean anything in the 4th dimension, apparently.
Oh, you know what? I also enjoyed the fact that some things are timeless. Again, I've had YouTube on the brain lately, and the guy is talking like, imagine getting your break as talent, and there's nobody to stop you from twisting the YouTube algorithm button to make you instantly famous. That I thought they represented that quite well.
Oh, dude, as someone who actually worked in a radio station with the transmitter controls next to me, you would be toast. You would never work again. You would be fined by the FCC. You would lose your license. Like, that was the kind of thing driven into us, is like, you don't mess with that. If you try to go above, they will catch you and you will be done. So I was fine with that, because I'm like, yeah, this is just a devil may care guy who doesn't care about the consequences. But I definitely took that as like, okay, this guy's career is over, because he should not be broadcasting to Canada. That's not allowed in their license, I'm pretty sure.
Little did you know, Tom, that his life would be over.
Well, they were in a different alternate universe, so maybe the rules are different too.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah. You know what? I heard from a certain galaxy being that there is no death. Just your signal goes.
That's right.
Yeah.
Not in their dimension, in the Andromeda galaxy. Also, how did he see the star chart when he's like, "Here, I'm pointing here on the star chart"?
He held it up and asked, and then he went and put it down, and then he talked slower, and then he finally caught under what he was saying. Then he asked,
I couldn't tell where the webcam was. That's all.
I mean, Tom, I don't know that more steps is what this story needed.
No,
I was pretty
definitely not. Yeah.
Can I say that the upscaling of this, because Brian, you mentioned the 4K or the HD or whatever, the upscaling of the original, I'm guessing 240 image up to what I was watching on my computer, there was no graininess at all. The upscaling, the actual video upscaling, was done immaculately.
What service were you watching it on?
I was watching. I bought it on.
You bought
Apple.
it. Okay, I was watching it on Pluto.
I bought the series on Apple.
I bought that episode on Amazon, and I thought all of it was a film transfer. I don't think that there was video on it. Like, even when you saw screens, those were analog oscilloscopes that they were mucking with.
Well, that would explain things, because that was definitely noticeable. Like, I was like, wow, this is actually.
And it's I was watching it on Pluto, so that's why I didn't notice that.
Well, and keep in mind, also, I was confused when HD first came out, and it was like episodes of Knight Rider were on HD net or whatever, and that's because those were all shot on film and they were easy. They
could just do the transfer. Yeah.
And that's why it was a big deal. That's why the Next Generation, when it went to HD, because it was on film, but the effects were done on video, so they had to redo all the effects.
Oh wow.
I also really enjoyed the end where the police are just gonna shoot. There's no like
I didn't even mind it.
preserve the innocence. Like if you stay in there, that's your problem. We're gonna shoot at this guy.
Well, and then as soon as she
almost
comes
wanted-
out, they shoot the door and it banks and hits her neck. So like,
you know what? I
I
almost had some of these thoughts, and then I thought, Brian, if you're going to complain about this, you're going to have to say the same thing to the Iron Giant. And I was like, I withhold my questions.
I withhold my objection. Yeah, I'll be honest. I'm sitting here bagging on all these little bitty things that annoyed me and may or may not have even been noticed in 1963, but I enjoyed it. It was a good time. It was a good monster movie.
Yeah, as much as I didn't like it, I still enjoyed it.
I loved 1/3 of it, but I will not defend that. If anything, it's a cautionary tale about being of the moment, bleeding edge tech. It's a good explanation of why you shouldn't rely too hard on gee whiz stuff. Like for example, Jurassic Park would stand even if you cut the 12 minutes of CGI dinosaurs, it would still be fine because the bulk of that movie is not of the gee whiz.
So we are going to watch the next episode, and then we'll reconvene and discuss that. What are you expecting? I assume none of us have seen it, from the ultimate episode. We're going to jump ahead to season 2, episode 5, Demon with a Glass Hand.
I'm going to guess that it is the most emotionally rich, the most Twilight Zone-y of
sounds very
Outer
Twilight
Limits
Zone-y.
episode. It probably something about alcoholism or something where it's got dual layers to the narrative. That's what I'm assuming.
I think you're giving us so much more credit than it's going to pull off.
Amos is like, no, it's going to be a demon, and he's got a glass hand.
Yeah, that's exactly it. The
Bury
galaxy
me
beam
with
was
my
very on
glass
point.
hand.
For 50 minutes, he's going to worry about breaking it. That's the
51
entire
minutes,
show.
Yeah.
He's
He's looking for his dislodged thumb or something.
I feel like it's going to be a more metaphorical, probably on that. It does feel like a Twilight Zone style title here, but I am eager to find out. So we will go watch that and then come back and talk about the ultimate episode of The Outer Limits, Demon with a Glass Hand. Now, if you want to get these episodes before everybody else, well, there's 2 ways to do it. One is become me, Brian, or Amos, so that you can be here while we are recording. 2, watch live when we stream on Tuesdays.
Tom, there's a third way.
What's the third way?
There's a third way. You can go to patreon.com.
Oh, yeah.
/Cordkillers.
And then you get the satisfaction of having supported us, being able to do the full experience.
And you get it 2 days early.
And you get After Talk, where we talk about what the next one's going to be, so you know before everybody else, and that doesn't even go out live. So please support us at patreon.com/Cordkillers. Like I said, next time, Demon with a Glass Hand. Thanks everybody for being with us. We'll talk to you then.